All right, you guys, looks like we are live now. We're just going to let everyone kind of settle in for a few minutes here. Hope everyone's having a really good Tuesday so far. Can't believe it's already October, the 6th of October at that. Welcome back, you guys. For those of you who have not been with us before or not seen our series, my name is Ben Jacobson, and I am here with Page One Power. And this is our SEO from Home series. It's basically a webinar that we get to sit down with some SEO industry leaders and experts, and we get to kind of pick their brain and talk to them about a variety of different topics and tactics and things that you can do to your site or for your clients that'll help you be better at SEO, marketing, the whole gamut. So we're super fortunate to be joined today by Patrick Stox, Ahrefs. He is going to be covering some really interesting stuff surrounding link attribution and all of the new link attributes that are coming out, how you can use those, what they're for, and all the different kind of variations inside of that. So we're super excited. Before we get started, I did want to let you guys know that we are still offering our ebook for free. So if you guys are interested in that, I'm just going to post a quick link in the chat. It's an ebook about link building. We cover everything from like doing research for your campaign all the way through complete execution of it. So, I mean, we've put in a lot of time and effort into that, and cumulatively inside of our team here, we have quite a few years of experience. So we're super excited for you guys to have that. Let us know if you guys like it. Tell us, send us a note or even comment. Let us know if you've had a chance to check it out. That being said, we are going to jump right into our webinar today. If you guys want to ask questions, be sure to definitely click on the Q&A button at the bottom. You'll see that little Q&A or even the chat. And ask questions away. You can ask myself or Patrick, of course. He said if you guys have questions in the meantime, be sure to ask those real time. We'll get to those the best we can. If we don't happen to get to your question, we'll try to address those at the end. Also, if you guys are interested in following along, we're going to be live tweeting today's episode as well. So if you guys want to engage with us on Twitter, you can do at Patrick Stox, which is PatrickStox, and at Page One Power. And you can ask your questions there. We'll do our best to answer you there. So all of that big intro read, without any further ado, Patrick, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us virtually here.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to have to go download that ebook too.
Absolutely. Well, let us know how you think or what you think of it. So tell us a little bit more about what's going on. I know I've been out of like day-to-day link building my personally for the last year or so. So tell me what's kind of going on with the new attribute tags and why they're important and why people should be paying attention to them.
Yeah, Google just decided to change kind of how Nofollow works or how they've been treating it for years. And then they added some extra tags, UGC and sponsored as well. And it's interesting because we don't really know what they're going to do with the data yet, how they're going to use it in particular. I don't think they're using it for ranking even now, but it's allowing for them to crawl, and I'll talk way more about it here.
Awesome. I'm super excited.
Let me get this up. 1 sec. Good. That's sharing the wrong screen, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like that might be more of the notes view.
Yep. Sorry about that.
You're good.
Trying to remember how this works in Zoom. There we go. Swap that. And now we're good?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right, awesome. Sorry about that. It's been a while. Yeah, so this is gonna be Wizard of Oz themed.
Love it.
It's gonna be fun. I am Patrick Stox, product advisor, technical SEO, brand ambassador at Ahrefs. Probably you've seen something I've written, seen me talk somewhere. I also organize a bunch of meetups, conferences, etc. I'm pretty active in the SEO community. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Nofollow, and we're going to kind of follow along with the Wizard of Oz a bit. So we had the web in the beginning. We got Dorothy in Kansas. And along came spam, a spam tornado here. And Google just decided like they wanted to do something about this. And so this is kind of how Nofollow came to be. Everyone wanted Google's page rank. Like that's really what differentiated Google. Links, votes, power between the sites. Everyone wanted page rank. Everyone started spam. Well, not everyone started spamming, but lots of people started spamming because it would increase their page rank. They loved seeing, if y'all remember the toolbar, there was actually a toolbar page rank, like 0 through 10, or I think not available technically through 10. So they wanted to do this thing they called no follow. And it's basically like, hey, we actually won't follow these links. We won't pass page rank through these links. And that's been their treatment ever since. Now, there's a lot of myths in the SEO community that said, oh, Google follows the links still, or oh, they pass a certain amount of page rank through it. Well, it turns out they confirmed last year, even though they've said it again and again and again over the years, they did not follow the links. They did not pass page rank at all. They did. I mean, it makes sense that they should do that. But they just took no follow as absolute. Like we should not follow these. We should not pass any page rank through these. But blog spam was really out of control, and that's what no follow. That's why it came to be. I would say was blog spam was rampant. Now there were other spam techniques later, but at the time it was blog comments mostly, and it wasn't just Google. Like a bunch of search engines were like, yeah, that's a good idea. We should have some way to combat this. So when this launched, it was a combination from Microsoft, Yahoo, and Google, all of them saying like, yep, no follow is a good idea. We're going to do that. We're going to adopt that.
So for those who may not have been familiar or working in SEO, because I know that SEO it feels like an industry that a lot of people are newly kind of getting into. What were like, can you give an example of like that kind of blog comment spam that anyone who's owned a website knows all too
I mean,
well? Can you
just
give an example of like why they did this from like a very like
it
literal
would
standpoint of why
Yeah, it
they
would
did
help
it?
your pages rank better. You still see automated systems going these days, even though so many blogs now have just turned off their comment systems. You'll have tens, hundreds, thousands of spam comments every day, people dropping links like great post, you should check out blah, blah, blah. Or, some will actually try and contribute a little, or I don't know. Most just don't even try and hide it anymore. Um, but yeah, it was basically people were commenting and automating the comments so that they get links back to their site, so that the page rank flows through, so that they rank better. And that was a huge abuse of the system. Like that's not how page rank was meant. That's not how really links were meant to be done.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we just kind of talked about this. This is a
Yeah.
little side story here, where it was made basically to comment spam, like blog comment spam, and no follow just said like, don't trust this, don't follow this link. So it was a way to protect websites and basically stop some of the spam on the internet. And they had a lot of help with this. It wasn't just the search engines. So they had all the major like blogging sites at the time. Some of these I don't think even exist anymore. Uh, but it was, lots of different platforms, even more platforms. Like the list was huge. Everyone was like, yeah, we're sick of spam. We're tired of fighting this. We're tired of, Kismet or honeypot fields and like all the different things to try and combat all this spam. It takes website owners a ton of time to go through that and like weed out what's good, what's bad. That's why so many sites have just given up and just disabled comments now. We even did that on Ahrefs blog just because the amount of links that come in, the amount of time. I mean, we'd probably have to have like 2 full-time people just to manage comment spam, which is ridiculous.
And it's getting harder to detect. I feel like I mean, maybe that's just me, but or maybe I'm just not as sharp at it. But man, I feel like managing any sort of comment section is just a nightmare because volume. I mean, as you continue to grow traffic, which I think is what's something that we're all trying to do, like you also are going to, at the same time, almost in parallel, like going to be growing like the amount of people that are engaging and submitting comments.
Yeah, and the more popular your site becomes, the bigger target you are for spam
Mm-hmm.
also.
Because the better
Uh,
your page rank at the time, or yeah,
yeah, and
absolutely.
it used to be people would be like, oh, click here, or like here's the full URL. And then people were like, well, everyone sees that. So now they drop links and stuff, and it's basically a blank space that's a link. So you don't even see it
Mm-hmm.
unless you're like looking at a code view rather than the text view. So people got really creative. They put links in periods, even in anything they could do to hide this, to try and get their comment through.
Definitely seen people doing like anchor tech or anchor links to like just spaces, blank
Yep.
space. It's tough.
Yep. And so SEOs, they were going to make this difficult because there were so many automated solutions for comment spamming. Uh, SEOs, when one tactic dies, we kind of just go on to like another thing. If something works, it's going to be abused. It's as simple as that. And in the past, it was kind of like everything worked. So gradually, Google's just kind of taken things away. They're like, nah, no more buying links, no more exchanging links. Article sites, if you remember those, e-sign articles, etc. There were literally hundreds, thousands of them, and their main purpose was regurgitate the same spun content,
Mm-hmm.
drop links, etc., directories, press releases, forum links, forum profile links. Anytime there's an opportunity, SEOs are going to use it. Google's probably going to take it away, penalize it. Anything that's too good, it will not last generally. There was PageRank Sculpting. People actually use Nofollow to try and like pass PageRank only to certain pages on their own website. So like, don't pass to my about page or my terms of service because I want my other pages that I care about more to have more links. So that doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
Not totally sure it ever really worked the way that the patent is written, but I don't know. Don't
I
know
was
for
gonna
sure.
say, because I mean, wasn't there also like some speculation that even like don't crawl like my about page, like it still takes all of that into consideration and still checks it out, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like that was something that there was a lot of people that did a lot of research about that and found that it still adds some like signals to the search. Or am I wrong? I don't quite recall that.
You have to ask Bill Slawski on that. Is like the whole reasonable surfer pattern. Like if it's a link and it looks like it's going to be clicked, it gets a certain amount of weight. So if that weight's just, if you know follow it, it doesn't mean that other ones get more weight. It just, that's kind of lost and gone. And I think it's probably going to hurt you overall in general. Like
Yeah.
suddenly your about page, which probably links to other pages or whatever, probably isn't flowing as well. And so you kind of just hurt yourself more than anything, more than likely. You can actually mono page rank through a site. But I don't think that's going to do much good these days. Widgets, templates. I mean, there were 1,000 ways. Web 2.0s, so many programs for like, oh yeah, let's do tiered link building. You got to build, have your main links, then build links to those, and then links to those, and basically each tier got more terrible and spammy. And finally, Google was just like, no, we're done with this, and they really hit people hard. I mean, uh, Penguin, I think, was a wake up call for a lot of SEOs and a lot of website owners. I mean, businesses just died overnight. It was the penalty hurt. It really, really hurt. There's little recommended reading here. This is actually like their guidance. It's like 23 questions on building a high quality page. So like there's a lot of talk about EAT. Well, this is all the original questions, the things that they were trying to look for as far as, is this site good or is this crap? Is this bad? And then some wizard guys would have helped everyone. That's the end of my Wizard of Oz part.
Love it.
So now to Batman. No. If you've seen Batman, you know this. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So Google, they were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to combat spam. It's what's best for their users. Unfortunately, with these algorithms, especially Penguin, they really hurt a lot of businesses. There were not just SEO companies, but like these companies that got penalized, plumbers, literally everyone. Not probably someone in every niche anyway. They had a great business, tons of leads, and then overnight it was gone. So you have all these articles about like, Google Penguin nearly killed my business. They killed my website, blah, blah, blah. SEOs were finally like afraid of Google. They have been told by Google, like, you don't do this for so long, but they're like, there's no repercussions, like whatever, like as long as it works, keep doing it. I was guilty of a lot of that myself because it did work, unfortunately. And there didn't seem to be, you hear the same thing for years, like, don't do this, but you're like, it works and nothing's happening, like if I do it. So this was them like just finally like clamping down. They're like, you're done. This is over. No more spam. A lot of sites were scared. They just decided to like no follow all links. They're like, I don't want to be linking out, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want to be accused of, being part of a link network. So they're like, we'll just no follow every single thing on the site. And they were scared, like, I don't want to get a penalty, for selling links or for being part of any kind of link network or anything like that. And it really became a recommended strategy for at least 2 or 3 years. I kept seeing this in SEO industry blogs where they would just recommend just no follow all your outbound links, which is crazy.
That's rough.
Yeah. It was everywhere. And so in certain countries it was more prevalent than others, but it was really kind of everywhere. And even some names you would recognize were recommending people do this. I don't think that was really ever a good idea, but now we have a ton of sites that are just completely like no follow on all their external links. And then people had like weird Penguin recovery strategies. I remember one, they called it like Orca or something. It involved like redirects and like blocking Google, which is weird because if they can't block, they can't follow, they can't really see the signals. But anyway, orcas ate penguins. And so like there were weird theories on like how to recover and that kind of thing, rather than like, let's actually put in the work and like fix this stuff. They wanted, quick fixes and how can I get back to where I was the fastest. And simply put, it wasn't going to happen. Like, you had all this spam that was working in your favor before that's just taken away. And so they're like, there's no way you're going to get back to where you were from some weird hacky method. You took the shortcuts to start with. So like, why should you just go back to, where you were in rankings? Other SEOs, they abuse other things. It's going to happen anytime there's something that works, they're going to look for it. So redirecting expired domains, building on expired domains. People started blocking links, especially affiliates. So they would like basically block a path in their robots.txt from crawling and then like start linking out that way. It would basically be like they link to themselves and then that link redirects, but no bots are allowed to follow that link because it's blocked. That path on their website is blocked. So they're like, well, if they can't see me link into these other sites, then they won't penalize me, or like they won't see my affiliate links, blah, blah, blah.
Did that work out? I can't imagine that worked well.
No, you really shouldn't block affiliate links. But most affiliate networks actually still do. It's really interesting. So lots of like holdover items from that era. Which I say that era. This is what, like 7-8 years ago now. Hasn't been all that long, but it's still like bad practices. Bad information is hard to get rid of. PBNs, this became a really popular tactic for a while. I think mostly people have realized like building a bunch of PBNs is probably more effort than doing white hat SEO, doing regular SEO these days. So, but I would say like this did work fairly well for a while, especially with affiliates or lower competitive niches. You probably can still get away with this just because they basically have no links. So if you're doing like any kind of links, but you probably have a better way of getting links, less time consuming, less costly. Guest posting, it's dead, right?
I think.
We'll see. we'll see the verdict on
We've
that
been
one.
saying that for a while. We've been thinking that, but
Yeah, I mean, it's another one that's Google has been saying, and SEOs are like, well, this still works way too well, and so we'll see how long this lasts or how they crack down on this. I'm not completely sure what they will do to completely stop it. Subdomain leasing, subfolder leasing. This was popular with like coupon sites. So you had like coupons dot every single site on the web, it seemed like, because these coupon sites would just pay and like have these subdomains, and then that would make all this stuff rank better. So there's a lot of other things. There's still a lot of people abusing different techniques, I would say.
graphic.
And Google decided like, okay, we get it. Like, we're hurting people. Let's stop that. So what they've started to do instead is they're being nicer. They're like, we won't penalize you. Instead, we're just going to ignore all those crappy links you build, all the things that we say, don't do that. Maybe that's what they're doing for a lot of guest posting now. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure they ignore at least some of them. But basically anything that they're like, well, you shouldn't do this, instead of saying, well, you did that, so you're at fault. They're like, well, we're just going to kind of ignore those, not pass link signals. So it's kind of like they're already no following them. They're all these links. They're like, we're just not going to pass any value through any of these tactics that we're like, don't do that. Which they kind of have been doing for a long time anyway. Affiliate links, they basically were no following them for people anyway. So all the people that like were like, well, let's do these things so Google doesn't even know I'm an affiliate, and like have these redirects. I don't know that was really helpful. And now they've introduced sponsored and UGC, which is user generated content. And these are basically just other types of nofollow links, like with additional information. So sponsored is supposed to say like, I bought this, or this is an affiliate link, I make money off of this somehow. And user generated content's like for a forum, for blog comments, they're like, I don't control that content. Someone else gets to add that content to the site. So it's basically, it wasn't me. I didn't add that. So maybe don't count those links the same, because it's not editorially given by the website itself. So again, sponsored, paid, affiliates, that kind of thing. Covered. That was the official, like, yes, this is for affiliates. You should have this on affiliate links, or no follow them, because really you can still use no follow for everything also. And UGC, again, forums, blog comments, etc. Anything where you don't actually control the content that gets posted. If y'all know Barry Schwartz, he was the first person on the web that we saw use a sponsored attribute, which makes sense because he monitors everything that all Googlers say all the time. But he went ahead and added to his site within a day of the announcement. So I'm pretty sure that's the very first sponsored link on the entire web.
Wow. Classic Barry.
Yeah, he's a beast. Um, it's incredible how he is on top of everything. And so obviously this was interesting for Hrefs too. So we went ahead and added this within 2 days of the announcement. We were monitoring UGC and sponsored attributes on links. So yay!
Quick.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know what kind of an impact it would have, and I think we probably would have delayed it a little bit if we had realized like they weren't really going to do much with these attributes. So in the past, what happened with Nofollow was Google completely ignored the links. They didn't use them for crawling, which surprised a lot of folks, including me. I thought for sure they would at least crawl them, and they didn't pass signals. And there's been many variations of like SEOs saying over the years that Nofollow passed some kind of signals through some kind of page rank, like 15% or 20% or 30%. They're like, well, they have to use them, right? They have to use these links in their index. Why would they not? Well, they simply didn't. They didn't even crawl them, which is kind of amazing. They completely respected them. Now, as far as signals, we've talked about PageRank, but they use other signals. At least the two that are well known are anchor text and this, which is like the text of the link itself, and then the surrounding text or the text around each of the links. So now they're getting like more, it's not just PageRank, but they're also getting context about saying like, here's what the page was kind of talking about and how they're linking to this other page. So they're getting more information about the new page basically that way. So these are great. It's great information for them to have to make their results more relevant, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So now what they're going to do is they're going to treat them as a hint for ranking. And what that means is some of them may pass like PageRank and other signals, others may not, or they may just use like the anchor text for stuff and not the PageRank part. Like we basically don't know what they're going to do still. They just get to use them however they want at this point. They could still choose like for most links, or even if they really want for all links, to say like we're not actually going to use any of this for ranking. And it's the same with sponsored and UGC. With sponsored, that should tell you like, yes, someone bought that. So it's in my opinion, a stronger signal than Nofollow to confirm like, yes, this is paid for. Kind of the same with UGC. Like UGC versus Nofollow is like, well, I might add a Nofollow because I don't want to vouch for another site or something. But in a UGC section, that may be used completely Nofollow just because you're like, I don't trust anything that comes out of that. Like people are ridiculous. Like they're going to add all sorts of stuff. They're going to drop links. So maybe they'll determine like to use one way and one another way. It remains to be seen still.
So is there like a possibility that using something like a UGC tag would pass like almost discretionary signals, perhaps, like to where you're saying, hey, I'm not vouching for this, but like if it's like I'm allowing this area because I think that what's being created by the users is going to be beneficial to my site. Like think of like a review, like if you're thinking of like a review page or something, that could be really beneficial. Like if someone's like, here's a link to my product, here's a video of me using it, link to a YouTube video. So have you seen any sort of conversation surrounding like passing some signals and not all signals with something like because that was what initially came to my mind when I was thinking of user generated content. Have you seen anything like that or any ideas surrounding that?
It's basically that they haven't announced anything yet, that we don't know what they're going to do exactly. That's a really great point. If it was me personally, I would have said that you should probably ignore anything from user generated content areas. But what you just mentioned is a great use case, which means even for UGC, there may not be one treatment. They're going to look at all the data and then figure out like, is some of this good? Is it all bad? Like, how can we use this? More than likely, it's going to be very murky. Before, we didn't use it, we didn't crawl it. Now, it's a hint and we can choose what to do. And likely that's going to change depending on the situation.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think that there is, I mean, clearly, I think everyone would ideally like to have some sort of ability to allow comments, on blog posts and things like that. But I mean, as a site owner, as someone who's worked for a lot of different companies that help manage websites, like it's overwhelming to where if you don't have a full-time team, like you said, like you guys have so much traffic that at that point, like it becomes so daunting. But I think that it's almost, um, kind of handicapping you a bit by not allowing you to leverage that in maybe the best way that you could, uh, and also keeping in mind like you are missing out on some potential like organic opportunities to help link. But I'd be curious to see what's going on with that, and that because I mean this came out 2019, right?
Yeah, it's been about a
Now,
year now.
okay, yeah. So I mean, it's interesting that we haven't seen anything really like even as far as like a trajectory of where that's going. So curious to see what happens
About
with that.
Yeah, about all we know is Gary Eesh has mentioned that there were several projects ongoing, like where they were looking at using the data, but basically like nothing has launched at Google yet. He said he'll let us know when something does and like kind of tell us hopefully some about how they're using it. But it's going to be very, very mixed now. I think before it was very cut and dry, like we don't crawl, we don't use these. Now it's like maybe we do, maybe we don't. So it's going to be, I think, harder for SEOs to kind of troubleshoot things unless they provide better guidance on what they are using and how they're using it.
Definitely.
And so I think I mentioned it's not only they're able to crawl and index, but they also are treating this as like we're able to use the different signals from the links now. And like this is all very recent. One of them was like last September. The other was, I think September was like we can crawl them, and then in March they're like we can actually use these or start using these signals. But again, like nothing that we know of has officially launched. I feel like it's been a long time since we've had any kind of a core update. Maybe in the next core update we'll see something around that. Some speculation here from my part. This is total speculation, but it's things that make sense. They actually have mentioned they're going to use it for spam identification now. We've talked about some like the values, like will I pass all this? Will I use some of the signals? Will I pass like some kind of partial value? Basically, they can go kind of any way they want with that, with every single link. It could be different from page to page, from site to site. I hope they provide better guidance because otherwise it's going to be really difficult to kind of troubleshoot different things. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you were going to say?
Oh, I was just saying it. I mean, even I can imagine them going in and finding specific industries, and because what comes to mind is like when you think of like influencers or like travel bloggers, like those sorts of people that are relying on like paid content, sponsored posts. I think a lot of that is really where, I mean, that was what struck me initially, is because there is so many things. I mean, if you, I'm a little bit more in the marketing space, but like in like Instagram and Facebook, like they rolled out not too long ago, like the requirements for listing as sponsored content. And I could see this being somewhat of a parallel move. I'd be curious to see if it is going to be affected universally across all platforms, or if it's something where they're going to like trial it on an industry that's just really rife with that, like influencer or travel blogging and that sort of thing.
Well, social media sites are a great example too of just no follow. All links basically are no follow on all of those networks. Uh, Being able to see who is sharing what, powerful Twitter profiles about SEO, sharing SEO articles. Those seem like pretty relevant links that they probably want to include
Hmm.
in their index. So like being able to get that additional information is, I don't know, it's going to be really interesting. I think the results are going to be a lot better from this change when they do start rolling things out. Seeing, I mean, it makes sense. See popular content, see how it's shared, who's sharing it. All that stuff is great information to say, like, this seems like the right kind of article that we should be showing at the top versus one that's, not shared, that people aren't talking about. And they don't use social signals. Well, now they don't really have to use like number of. They can just look at the link data and say, like, these profiles seem relevant. They're sharing this content. It looks good. They probably can use things like that.
Like it.
So for me, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, should I pass value? Should I not? I want to use real, man, little joke. It's not a thing. Don't use that. If you do, it'll be ignored. But one of the things they did say, that one of the reasons they did this is that even Google was missing 50% of the web. Now, whether that's an overstatement or not, I was actually at that presentation, and he literally had a graph, and it was like half the web blank, like literally a graph, and then like half of it was blank. I don't know if that's an exaggeration or if even Google was missing half the web. That's kind of insane if that's true. Simply because of no follow tags. Now, they definitely were missing some important things, but generally, I would say, like, just because one site no follow something doesn't mean there's not 20 other ways to crawl to that page via sitemaps, via Google Search Console, indexing via other websites. There's usually other paths. So if that's really the case that it was half the web, that is absolutely bonkers.
But it's just close enough where you feel like I feel like there's an air of truth to that, just from, because I've seen what you're referencing. Like, the amount is pretty staggering.
Yeah, it is. It's insane. So there were tons of tweets around this, because it was a big thing. Like, if Google was really missing like half the web, that's crazy. So why did they change the no follow? We talked about this. Sites just did it. It's, I have a bunch here, but we added one more that would have been great for this slide. Social media networks, they're all like no follow links. But Wikipedia, tons of major news sites. There are sites in entire countries, because this, like, we should no follow all external links becomes so prevalent from all of their influencers that like entire countries are difficult to crawl. Even Ahrefs had respected no follow in the past, and like we could see it. Like, our data for certain areas was not the best, because we were respecting that. Now we're like, oh well, Google's not, so like we can get that data too. So yay.
What are you seeing as far as, like, I mean, does that statistic seem to kind of vibe with what you guys see when you do your crawls with Ahrefs?
I wouldn't say 50%, no.
Gotcha.
But I would say it definitely helped. If you even look at our crawl graph, you will probably see when we change that. We have a big data page, and you can see like our index pages and that kind of thing over time. And you'll probably even see when that happened.
Nice.
So publishing sites, again, like specifically called out by Google for doing this, which is true. Like every Forbes, every blah, 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 they all just kind of did this blanket no follow. The interesting thing is, with the new attributes, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to. It's basically all up to you. They're saying if you had no follow before on, paid links, on affiliate links, just, you can leave it as no follow. If you want to give them the additional information and put a sponsor tag up there, you can. But I would say this was maybe influenced from Danny Sullivan going over to Google, because he's basically like, you don't have to do anything if you don't want. You don't have to make any changes. And that's rare because usually SEOs obsess over every single update. Like, oh my God, I got to add authorship, which then went away. And, this running joke for a while. But they launch stuff, people focus on it. AMP, I don't know if AMP will make it, but everyone was so focused on AMP for a while there when it launched. They're like, oh, we got to do AMP. Google's pushing for AMP. Now I feel like besides news, like I don't know that people really did AMP, and I don't know that AMP will really last because now they're making it so like other websites that are fast will get the same benefits as AMP. So it's like, we'll see how that goes.
And there's a definite bit of cat and mouse that kind of goes on, it feels like.
Yeah. So this was them just straight up saying like, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to. Like, there's no penalty. We're not going to punish you. There's basically there's no enforcement for using the new types. So this is from earlier this year, but I wanted to see, were people adopting this at all? And we'll probably update this again, like start of next year, and just see how it progressed. But we looked at the top 110,000 sites in our database to see just kind of the usage of Nofollow, UGC, and sponsored. And one of the interesting ones, 10.6% of all backlinks to these sites were nofollowed. That's more than 1 out of 10 links to these top sites are completely nofollowed. That is way higher than I ever expected, but I guess I'm not really surprised because, again, tons of sites do a blanket nofollow for like all external links. But that's a pretty huge amount. These are some of the biggest sites out there. Now, they're also, the sites that are linking to them are linking to a ton of other sites. And if Google wasn't crawling those, yeah, they definitely could have missed some sites in that. And then 3.6% of all internal links are nofollow. So if you don't know this, Ahrefs has an internal link database as well. It's actually multiple times bigger than our external link database because people link to their own pages more than they link to other pages. But we're like the only ones with that data. And 3.6% internal nofollow is insane. The only reasons I could think people would do that would even be PageRank Sculpting or because they're trying to like keep something out of the index.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was like, this seems like a really odd number. Why would you not follow your own links? But again, I think it might be, like you said, deriving from some of those maybe antiquated techniques that people were trying to game the system a bit.
Yeah, it should be 0% internal nofollow. I cannot think of I've tried, I've talked with other SEOs too, and I'm like, show me one legitimate use case of nofollow on an internal link. One reason it would help you, one reason you should use it. I've got none. If I was Google, I would just ignore every one of these because it's just website owners shooting themselves in the foot by doing something they shouldn't do.
Yeah, definitely.
So if I was doing a project at Google, I would ignore that completely and probably have better results because of it. Now, whether they do that or not, I don't know, because hopefully they'll announce something. And then I looked at the different domains using UGC and sponsored tags. And, they're still fairly new. This was maybe 5 months in when I was looking at this. I would say I was surprised that as many sites as I saw did use UGC. I mean, 0.5% of the top 110,000, that's actually pretty good for just like a few months in, because those sites typically aren't the ones that will like do updates quickly. They have longer timetables. They're not going to adopt the latest, greatest, newest thing. They're going to move slower than other websites. Sponsored, basically no one was using that yet. It will be interesting to see how this changes next year, because again, people weren't really required to do this. There's no real benefit for them to do it, and yet people still did it, which is fascinating to me, because I would put that on my backlog basically as like, never do this, because why would you if there's no benefit?
So with the with the sponsored tag on there, and again, it's something that is, as you mentioned, it's not required. They're saying if you don't want to do it, don't do it. So in the case of where obviously you're not supposed to be paying for links, but if you're admitting that, hey, this is a partnership that I'm doing with XYZ company, um, is there like I guess, is there a reason for anyone to, because I mean, I feel like that's almost outing yourself a little bit. Like, hey, this is someone gave me money to post this. It's not my genuine feedback. Do you think that that could play into why there's such a low utilization of that upfront? Or do you think that there's maybe it's just a lack of adoption?
It could be either. Yeah, any number of reasons.
Yeah, I'd just be curious. It almost seems like, because I think that's something that, again, kind of coming from my background in marketing, it seems like something where um, the idea of like, hey, I am an influencer and X company wants me to do this, or this is how I make my money is by driving link traffic. I think people are a little timid of that. And so this is a really interesting, I'm curious to see what the adoption of that is going to be and how it's going to affect people long term, especially when I feel like people are maybe a little timid to admit that they're having paid links in certain capacities like that.
Well, they should be like following them anyway, but yeah.
Should be.
Um, yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of a gray area that you're right, like people probably don't want to out themselves. They're saying like this is an optional thing, so why would they do it? And unless Google gives people a really good benefit or a really good reason to do it, I think the adoption will be really low. But it could be they just don't really need a lot of data around this anyway, because they already have like Nofollow or Follow, and they can use other things. I'm sure they've been identifying like sponsored links for years and years and years and discounting them already and paying one where they can.
And it'd be also interesting, I think, just one last point on that is because you are analyzing such large sites, to your point, the ability for people to move quickly and adapt to new changes. I'd also be curious to see how that number shifts when you start looking at maybe like some like sites that are in kind of that more middle ground area, medium-sized sites, small companies, individual publishers. If the adoption is higher there because they have the ability to move more quickly, or if it's something where larger corporations are maybe just sitting on their hands a little bit because they're not entirely sure how to move forward with it.
I'll talk a little bit in a minute about how I think this will happen.
Cool.
I also looked at the internal usage of UGC and sponsors. So, like, again, people linking to other pages on their own website. And I found it kind of interesting. I did think, like, oh, well, UGC sort of makes sense. Like, people maybe are referencing, like, communities are referencing another page on a site to help people, etc. That makes sense. Sponsored does not make sense to me. Like, who buys a link from their own website? I don't really understand how or why that data is here. And the only thing I could come up with is, again, like the people that were masking affiliate links before, using their own, like a redirect through their own domain. Maybe they mark those sponsored. Although they're preventing crawling of them anyways, I don't know that helps them, but that's pretty much the only thing I could come up with as to like why there would even be sponsored attributes on internal links. So just a couple of quick takeaways. People are adopting UGC and sponsored. It's not a huge amount, but like it's there, which was more than I was expecting at the time. And I would say they're definitely overusing Nofollow, both externally and internally. So I think Google's going to ignore a lot of that usage. And this is going back to how this is going to get wider adoption. If you remember when I talked about Nofollow originally, it was like other search engines helped them, and then all of these platforms. Well, Bing's going to use these hints also. And then I pulled down the CMS systems where I could find them for these sites. And you'll see like WordPress, UGC, it's actually built into WordPress now in the comment system. They added that. And so sites that were up to date, et cetera, we did see this for them. Sponsored, I didn't find anything in WordPress core, but there are several plugins that add sponsored to links, including affiliate links, which again is how I think it ended up getting some of the ones that do like the internal links. I think that's how this made it into sponsored, made it into internal link attributes.
So it was a mistake almost, I would imagine.
Sort of. It's probably that they program it in as that's their affiliate link. It like redirects through this, and then it just adds it in. So it's sponsored shows as an internal link on their website.
Gotcha.
But I didn't see too much across other platforms. Again, this was like 5 months into these things launching, like even being announced. So WordPress moved quick, not surprising. Some of these others, I'm not sure if they added support yet or not, but it's entirely likely over the next year or so, people will get on board. Someone will get bored. A lot of these are open source. They'll just go ahead and contribute something. It'll get adopted into the core. And then bam, like all the sites that run on these platforms will have it. I think that's going to be their path to adoption is, an individual website owner, unless you're Barry Schwartz, you're not going to go add sponsored to these posts and stuff, to your links, especially when there's really no benefit. Like a tech team is going to look at that. A dev team is going to be like, what does it get me? Why are we doing this? Oh, nothing. Okay. I'll do that like 20 years from now. Cool.
Yeah.
So unless the platforms these sites run on adopt it and like kind of force this out, I just don't see it going wide. Or Google will have to give people a reason to do it. Again, WordPress 5.3 is when they added this for UGC. And this is what I was talking about. Like if they don't give some kind of carrot or some kind of stick, this is going to be really, really slow. The platforms will do it because, again, someone gets bored. They want to contribute to an open source project. Individual websites, I don't see SEOs pushing for this. I haven't heard of any SEO like saying like, we absolutely have to, go add a UGC tag to this. And I think we're the driver of stuff like that. So if we're not pushing for it because there's no reason to push for it, I don't know that, it's really going to happen that well or that fast. But this is kind of the only carrot that we have so far, is that they're saying if they get enough data, they'll be able to train their algorithm, and then eventually you won't have to use Nofollow at all. My personal thought of that is like, let someone else train the algorithm. Like, oh, cool, eventually won't have to do anything, but I don't have to do anything now, so why would I? So it's not really a great carrot even.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like that's almost even alluding to, if you're not having to use Nofollow, does that also mean that like sponsored in UGC is also going to go the same way? Like they're like, hey, we already know, since you guys, like, are they saying, it's kind of hard to understand obviously, but it's almost like if they're taking this giant overarching Nofollow blanket and they're trying to allow users to self-sort themselves into the applicable categories. And if they're saying they want to potentially do away with Nofollow altogether, would that in turn also mean doing away with the new tags that are coming out?
Yes.
Or yeah,
exactly that.
Interesting.
So it's basically like if you give them enough data that they can then recognize like what is a paid link, what is a user generated link versus like what's a link that the site generated, or like when should I pass value, when should I not. Once they can make that decision on their own, they no longer need us to help guide them.
Interesting.
So we could probably all just go like no follow everything and screw up their entire plans, but don't do that.
Like, no, revolt.
Yeah, let's just mark everything wrong, and then when the machine trains, it's going to be like, what is this? They're going
Ensure
to
our
look at the
job
data and be like,
security for
nope.
another decade.
There you go. um, yeah. So again, like they've said basically the only carrot is we could potentially not have to tag these links in the future. I don't know that that's a strong enough argument to really drive adoption. But they may really not, because they've already sort of been doing this. Like, let's ignore these links.
Mhm.
These are definitely paid links. These are edu scholarship links. Like these thousands of things that SEOs have already ruined. Like we've already trained them so much data, so they may not need a whole lot more refinement data to actually get this right. Here's some additional information on these. You can have more than one attribute. So even though like UGC kind of works the same as nofollow, you can use both if you want on like forum or blog comments. You can use UGC and sponsored together. So if you do any kind of paid content syndication, you'll have like advertorials, or you can pay for guest posts. And so like it's not you that's writing the content, that's the site owner. You're taking someone else's content, you're putting it on your website, and with this you can say like someone else wrote that and they paid me for it.
Gotcha. Interesting.
This is a bit technical, but basically, according to the standard, you should always have a space that separates these different attributes. But Google, as with many things in their parser, like the web is a messy, messy, messy place. This comes from a technical SEO who's seen everything wrong 1,000 ways. I've probably still not seen everything wrong every way that it could go wrong. So they're going to allow a lot of things, so spaces, commas, semicolons. Their parser is really flexible because basically people just do this wrong in a bunch of different ways. One thing that we saw kind of early on was people tried to tag an entire page as UGC. So like devs, when they're trying to do this, will be like, well, can I just say this whole page is user generated content? So they're going to add it like as a meta robots tag, for instance. Does not work that way. Each and every individual attribute or link has to be tagged with the attribute for them to apply. So there's basically no page level way of doing this, which would make a lot of sense if they allowed it, actually, because again, people will want to say this whole page was generated by or was written by someone else. But right now, like you just have to apply it for each link that's added within the content area.
Gotcha.
And then just don't use it to block pages from being indexed. There are better options. I mentioned this earlier when Google said like 50% of their web is gone. Well, there's other paths to content. Just because you follow a link to, I don't know, some private login page or whatever, doesn't mean you didn't submit that in your sitemap or someone linked to it externally. Like basically, no following was never a good way to block a page from being indexed. There are tons of other options that are better for that, but I think this is one of the reasons we saw so many internal links used, or so many internal links with the nofollow attribute, was just they were trying to keep something from being found, and not a great way to do that.
Got it.
And that's all I got.
Awesome. That was super informative. Thank you for that. like I said, it's been a little bit of time since I've been working day to day in link building and stuff. So being able to understand that a little bit more in depth was super informative. We did have one question pop up here. It was a little off topic, so I wanted to kind of hold on to it for the end here, and I'll read it to you. It says, does link building have any relation with the IP address or the CDN network? Further details on that. If you want to publish 3 articles, which will be a follow link, but from the same IP, will that impact link values?
3 articles from the same. So just ignore IPs. I will say that's an old myth. Well, I don't think it wasn't a myth back then, but like the web has evolved. It used to be most sites had their own IP addresses, et cetera. Now they mention CDNs. Well, now you have millions of sites on the same IP range. Same with like massive hosters, et cetera. We've actually discussed at Hrefs even removing the IP data from our database to help prevent some of the myths like this. Because basically the IP address where the links come from just do not matter. Again, millions of sites are on Cloudflare, millions of sites are on Akamai, Fastly, GoDaddy hosting, Bluehost, HostGator, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be like the same IP ranges. Some of those shared boxes have like thousands of sites on the same computer with the same IP address. So generally, like, I would ignore IPs from any link data.
Awesome. And then another question popped in. What value, if any, could a no-follow backlink have for your website?
Right now, I would say that's still 0. In the future, again, like it will depend. They might pass full value through even though it's no follow. Like it's because it's a hint for them, not a directive. Like they can basically do what they want with the data. Personally, I would be, if I was Google, I would probably be looking at Wikipedia. And like all Wikipedia links are no follow. Well, it's a community curated resource with tons of links to related things for all these topics. I would probably be passing value through those links. I think it makes sense. So again, right now, none. In the future, potentially full value.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. Also, alluding back to what we were seeing earlier, like they mentioned, like no follow could be completely going away. So like the value of that inherently right now is 0, but like as that goes away, obviously that value is still going to be 0, but what that was actually taking the place of, the meat behind it, the fact that it is a something that should not be indexed or crawled by Google, from what you're indicating, that value could then turn into something later on down the road, no follow attribute aside. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with as things are kind of changing with the environment. I feel like there's a lot of people that are doing influencer, and they're doing like their own self-promotion, especially this year. I feel like a lot of people are kind of getting their side hustle on. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of manage and work their way through this next few stages where they kind of figure out what that attribute really means.
Yeah, it's, I would imagine the first few months, the reason we haven't seen anything yet is it's probably all been data gathering. And then it's going to require, probably the webmaster team and developers and engineers. And they're going to have to look at this data and try and make sense of all that. Should we count that? Should we not? They're going to have to tag data in different ways to say, like, should we count this? Should we not? Is that a paid link? Is that an affiliate link? Do we pass value there? Like, there's a lot of decisions that they're going to have to make. And, it's more than likely, no matter what they launch, they're going to have to make adjustments to it anyway. But yeah, it's going to be a process. I had someone actually reach out to me a few weeks ago, and they're like, "Do you think they've done this yet?" And I'm like, "No." No, like it takes a while. Like they could probably launch something tomorrow if they really wanted, but to get it right, to get that data tagged in a way that they don't have to continuously make adjustments is going to take them some time to look through. I mean, the web is a big place. Like there's so much data to go through. I imagine someone has spent weeks just looking at links, looking at how they are, trying to look at like different page attributes and tagging this stuff, and they hate their job, but someone has to do that. And it's probably multiple people that are having to do that just to even come to some kind of consensus on like how we should treat these things.
Yeah, I mean, especially because this could have massive ramifications. I mean, potentially, like right now, it's not, but uh, you know, like we saw with the Penguin update, like if they're rolling things out, and to your point, they probably are taking their time because they're wanting to ensure that they're not destroying a blogger's site by penalizing if you don't have sponsored uh, or if you don't have user generated content. Like they probably want to make sure that they're taking their time, just for your point, to make sure that they're not hosing themselves and having to rebuild from scratch again.
Yeah.
Another question just popped in here. 100 links with high spam score, but all of them are no follow. Do we have to disavow those in GSC?
If they're no follow, no. If you want to be super cautious, if they show some kind of a pattern, you can. But if they're no follow, like basically they're dropped from the link index already, and they're not going to be counted against you. Uh, for now. Jeez, I didn't think about that. What if they just started like saying like, oh, even though these are no follow, like this, they have a history of doing this, or they're showing a clear pattern of link spam. Well, they said they'll use the data for detecting spam more. So yeah, it makes sense. If you're overly cautious, yes, I'm not sure I would do that for 100 links unless there was some kind of a clear pattern, though.
Yeah, I think kind of what we've seen and probably what we would advise is pretty similar to that. I think if you're hesitant enough, or it's a concern enough to where you're asking right now, like that might be enough of the answer that you're looking for. Um, and again, take this with a grain of salt. But I think that if it's something where you're like, man, we're getting a lot of spam and we're no following, to what we are talking about earlier, they might change that. If you want to be extra careful, if you're like, I got nothing to do with these incoming spam links and I don't want to be associated with it. I think that's kind of where the original half the web's no follow is coming from. But I think it might be worth exploring at least, to kind of see how spammy those look and if you think that it could hurt you in the future. But yeah,
Yeah,
100 links to go through it's not an easy task.
I would be curious. Like, I don't know whose spam score you're looking at, but I don't know. This is me talking personally, not as an HRES representative for a second. I've looked at the methodology for the link spam for several tools. I'm not comfortable with any of them. I think anyone that just blindly trusts those will do more harm than good if they just disavow the links that are in those spam reports, because a lot of the things they're counting as spam just simply are not spam.
Good. That's a really good point to bring up, is maybe even double check through some of those links and make sure that they are really high spam scores and not just something that's getting auto flagged because it might have been adjacently related to something that was spammy in the past. Sometimes you can still get really positive links that get caught up in kind of the spam there too. Great question. I think that's just about all we have, and we actually are about 10 minutes over the hour, so that's perfect. um, that was really good. Do you have any other closing thoughts? If you were to maybe talk with everyone that gets a chance to see this, with one takeaway, I know we kind of already hit on it, probably not really affecting it a whole lot, but if you're maybe talking to other SEOs and their clients have questions about this, what kind of pieces of advice would you be able to offer them that they can maybe go to their higher up managers, or if they're working with an agency, their clients, to kind of have that conversation about these new tags?
Just be careful with blanket no follow. Like you should not be no following every external link. You also should be careful with no follow on your own website. Again, what was that? 3.6% internal links, no follow. I have no use cases, none. I would say that really should be zero. So things like that, I think you're doing more harm than good.
Definitely. Well, awesome, Patrick. Thank you again so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and go through all the new link attributes with us, and taking the time to join us for this episode today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys joining us each and every time. We'll be back here. I think we got another one coming up next week, so we'll see you guys back here. If you had to step away for any time, we do have this episode recorded. We'll have it up on our website later this week. If you guys have any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out to PageRank Power or Patrick, Arefs, any of these guys. We're super happy to talk with you. Thank you again, Patrick. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
See you later.